Welcome back to the channel, Black is One, where the agenda is to elevate the consciousness of the black race so we can unite, build, and prosper. Today I'm going to be touching on the present conflict between Hamas and Israel. As black people, whose side should we be on? Remember in my last video when I was making the point that there is a revolution going on in Africa right now. 4 black countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Niger, has expelled their former downpresser, France, from their countries. And by watching the local news, you would never know about it. But Hamas attacked Israel. Israel has responded with what they call an all-out siege on Gaza. And it is in our local news. The Prime Minister himself has visited Israel and has condemned the attack by Hamas. But the question remains, in this flood of news coverage and analysis of the conflict, each side courting the international public for their moral support and sympathy. As Africans, as people of African descent, who do we support? Or who should we support? That is the question I'll be trying to answer in this video. For many people, the choice is simple. We support Israel because they are the people of God. There is even a video of a Christian in South Africa saying, we must support Israel no matter what. Because if we speak against Israel, we are speaking against God. Now, anybody who has ever walked through a church door knows that, even if you're not a Christian. That is classical evangelical Christian doctrine. From the day I left my mother's womb, I've been hearing about this dispute between Israel and Palestine. We know for a fact that the land belongs to Israel, don't we? If you have been to church even once, you would know that. But again, how did the people who we call Israel came by this land? They got it from God. The Bible prophesied or commanded them to capture the lands from the Palestinians. Now, let's unpack that. First of all, this might be a shocker to some, but there's nothing special about Israel than there is something special about the Chinese or the Arabs or the Western Europeans or any other group of people. Every group of people think that they are special, the best thing since sliced bread. It's like how everybody thinks that their mother is the greatest woman on earth. Quote unquote Israel wrote a book, the Torah or the Old Testament, and make a claim to be God's chosen people. It's a claim. That's all. It is rooted in nothing whatsoever but the opinion of the people who wrote it. Had it been written by the Chinese, they would have described themselves with similar adjectives. In the book of Adolf Hitler, arch nemesis of the Jewish people, and everyone that is not Aryan, in his book, only Aryans were special and superior and deserving of life. So let's get that out of the way. There's nothing special about Israel. They live, they love, they laugh, they lie, they die, they decay, like everybody else. But let's entertain for a minute that there was, in fact, some prophecy that entitles Israel to the lands of the Palestinians. Who would be those people entitled by prophecy or divine decree to the lands of Palestine? Who would be those people to whom the land was promised in Scripture? There are multiple answers to that question. You see, on any multiple choice paper, among the answers, there's always one that cannot be the answer. That one answer that is way off. So according to the elimination technique, we find that impossible answer and eliminate it first. Thereafter, we can focus on the other possible answers. In the case of this question, going by the scripture, who would be those people to whom the land of Canaan, aka Palestine, was promised? The present day Israelis in Israel who occupy the land right now is that impossible answer. So we can eliminate that answer. I'm sure some people are confused at this point. You know, like, what do you mean by that? Now, there's a distinct difference between the Israelites and the Israelis. The Israelites would be the ancient people and their offspring, the extended family of Jacob, according to the Bible. who came out of Egypt under the leadership of Moses, then Joshua, who would go on to slaughter the inhabitants of Canaan and took the land for themselves around 1500 years BC. Those Israelites, they and the territories they captured, which they call Israel, part of Palestine, would themselves be conquered by several powers over the centuries. The Babylonians, the Persians, the Ottomans, the Romans, and the British. In the time of Christ, the Romans would have been in charge. But the Jews that lived there at that time would still have been the descendants of Jacob, Israel, Israelites. On the other hand, the Israelis, present-day occupiers of a portion of Palestine, have no ethnic connection to the ancient Israelite. They are Europeans. They hail from the old Khazarian kingdom in the Caucasus Mountains, which is part of Russia and Ukraine, who converted to Judaism about 900 years ago. My point is this: biblically speaking, the Jews in Israel now are not the same people referred to in the Bible. They are European immigrants in Palestine. The British government, not God's power, removed the Palestinians from their territory through political maneuvers and deceit and military force to make way for these converted Jews from Europe. They started to move in the early 1900s until they were granted statehood in 1948. Let me say that again. Israel, that is now at war with Hamas, is not the people in the Bible. They were put there in 1948 by the British military. So if Israel is in fact the owners of the land according to God's promise, it would not be those people presently at war with Hamas. Now, mind you, all of that was hypothetical. Of course, I don't accept anybody's claim to other people's property. That's the mentality of a thief. Whosoever said that or wrote that simply invoked the name of God to make holy an act that is most unholy. So I'm not in support of that. But I'm still answering the question: who should black people support in this conflict? The Christian kings of Western Europe, France, Britain, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and the others, descended upon the lands of the peoples of Africa, the Americas, Australia, and other places with a kind of greed for wealth and power and lust for blood never before seen in the history of humanity. They were sanctioned and instructed by the Catholic Church, which appointed itself as the voice of God to vandalize all non-European civilizations. According to their theology, Western European Christians, by virtue of their Christian faith, were the new children of God, and as such, superior. And all other lands and peoples who did not, quote-unquote, know Christ were inferior, godless, soulless savages, heathens, and as such, undeserving of their lands, their lives, and their liberty. Their lands were to be taken. Their lives were to be wasted, and the survivors were to be enslaved. The amount of carnage and centuries of misery that resulted from these Christian campaigners in the Americas, places like Mexico and Peru, Guatemala, America itself, or the US, Canada, the Caribbean, in Australia, and in Africa and other places, is unimaginable, inexplicable, and unspeakable. So you can understand why, in principle, I can't support anyone or any nation that in the name of God appoint themselves as other people's overlords. I cannot support the claims of anyone who, in the name of God, can name themselves owners of other people's property. No, it is wrong. And the only people who do not find that mentality reprehensible are those who are guilty of it. And they are the ones who are supporting Israel right now. But I'm sure somebody's going to say, what about Israel's right to self-defense? Forget how they came by the land. Hamas attacked them first. Well, that's a fair proposition. But let's not pretend like Israel has been a good neighbor. what about the plight of the Palestinians who have been under Israeli repression from 1948 until now? At what point should someone react to repression? How much abuse should one endure before they react? Is there a legal limit or moral limit for state repression before reaction can be expected from the repressed? The British government, the colonial government in Kenya in the 1950s, felt justified for their, what I call, their all-out siege on the Mama fighters, because the Mamas attacked first. But they forgot that they were on Kenyan land that they stole, having Kenyans living as slaves. I'm still answering the question, Should we support Israel or Hamas in this most recent escalation of the perennial Israeli-Palestinian conflict? European Jews were involved in the European Christian slave trade, which some people call the transatlantic slave trade. They were Jewish slave owners right here in Jamaica. They profited immensely from the misery and destruction of black people. These pious looking people who we come to associate with Abraham's religion, the Sabbath, and God's chosen, invested in the blood of black people. I wonder if you get where I'm going. At this point, I'm sure you realize that as a descendant of African people, I don't necessarily sing the praises of Israel, nor present day Israel. They don't get my automatic support because the word Israel is in the Bible. So you must be thinking that I support Hamas. If that's what you thought, you're mistaken. Hamas is not Palestine. They're a small portion of Palestine. As a matter of fact, they're a group. They're like a political party. They are designated a terrorist group by the European and the US. But that designation coming from the US has no value, really. Because the African National Congress political party, the ANC, led by Nelson Mandela, the present ruling party in South Africa as we speak, was labeled a terrorist organization. Mandela himself, who the West loved to celebrate as a symbol for the struggle for social justice, was designated a terrorist by the US government. Palestinians are Arabs, and Arabs have enslaved millions of Africans, more than the Europeans, for a longer period of time, under the banner of Islam. Another set of people with a religious claim that God have chosen them, that they are God's vessels, and as such, superior. Everybody else inferior, are infidels, who by virtue of being a non-Muslim has no right to land and life and liberty. This is how Arabs now come to control Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Libya, and all the countries in North Africa. The indigenous black inhabitants were driven out and enslaved under Islam. We black people have always supported the Palestinians' right to self-determination. Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Malcolm X, the Black Panther movement, Peter Tosh himself. And in recent years, Nelson Mandela's grandson, Mandla Mandela, has called for a free Palestine. The African Union has revoked Israel's observer status at the African Union because of their treatment of the Palestinians. This is black people making it their business to oppose injustice, even if it is not done to black people. But have you seen how Africans are treated in these Muslim countries? The United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and so on. They are treated no better than how African Jews are treated in Israel and how we are treated in the US. I say it all the time, Black people have no friends. They don't like us. They like our things, our support, our culture, our gold, our land, to advance their interests. But they don't like us. We will fight and die in their wars. Then they turn around, make up with their enemies, and join forces against us. Black people fought in World War II on the side of the US and France and Russia and so on, to deliver the European Jews from the gas chambers in Germany. Now after the war, Germany and the Jews have reconciled, and both are now enemies of the black race. I do not support Israel, neither do I support Hamas. I don't even know if Hamas and the larger Palestine are on the same page. So to support Hamas and to support Palestine, I'm not sure it's the same thing. I'm not even neutral in this conflict. I empathize with the Palestinians in the sense that what Israel is doing to them was done to us in South Africa under apartheid, and in America under Jim Crow. I think Israel is the aggressor. But both of them, the white Arab Muslims and white Europeans who call themselves Jews, have been our down pressers in the past and in the present. The international media is working double shifts to get us to care about this conflict because the people involved are white. That's the whole truth. It's the same thing they did when Russia attacked Ukraine. There's no such campaign for sympathy and international support for the people affected by wars in Africa and elsewhere. Nobody is applying any sanction on any side to try to stop the war. As you are watching this video, there are armed conflicts in Africa, in Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, in Central African Republic, in Sudan, in South Sudan, and others. But you don't hear about them. I wish that good sense prevail between Israel and Hamas or Palestine. I too want world peace. But that's all for now. But this African brain will not be occupied with finding solutions for their problems until I would have found a solution for my people's problems. I am not interested in whether to side or not to side with Israel or Hamas. I want to find solutions to the problems in Haiti. How do we feed the African population? How do we stop the West from intervening in our politics and stealing our resources? How do we end the conflicts? Or as PLO Lumumba would say, silence the guns in Africa. How do we silence the guns in Jamaica? How do we get our reparations for hundreds of Holocausts with an S that we endured over the last 500 years? Just as the European Jews received their reparation for their one Holocaust, which lasted for just 5 years. These are the things that should keep black people's problem-solving skills engaged. These are the things we should be on our knees presenting to God, asking for His intervention or wisdom to solve. These are the topics we should be discussing. These are the essays we should be writing. These are the news we should be watching. I rest my case. I'm going to leave it here for this one. Subscribe to the channel. Share the video. Leave a comment in the comment section. Love black people. Black is one. Live the revolution.